Exactly.
What time does the 7 o'clock meeting start?
7 o'clock. Welcome to Position in Neutrality. We're a little light because of the Christmas holiday, so bear with us. We open every meeting of Position Neutrality with a prayer, and special tonight doing the prayer for us is Brian.
All right, everybody. God, I ask you to bless this home and everybody in it. I ask you to bless everybody out there in YouTube land and help us, guide us through the end of this year. Amen.
Amen.
That was a short and powerful prayer from Brian. Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody in Canada. We're warmer than you are. And those of you that are following us other places, thank you for that. Thank you for bearing with us. What we do at Position in Neutrality is we take a look at the suggested instruction for a step or so a week directly out of this book. And we use this book in 12-step recovery. Why? Yeah, the process described by the authors of this book's been proven to work for addicts of the hopeless variety, addicts to alcohol and other substances. So, my goodness, we got colds in the house too. Anyway, so what I endeavor to do each week is to show people how I find my experience in this book and encourage them to have their experience with the book, because it's a book of experience. And we try and help people understand that although this is a book that's claimed by all of Alcoholics Anonymous, we're not the we that the authors of this book talked about. They tell you clearly who the we is. So if you've struggled in your recovery because you're not understanding that this is their testimony, you do what they did, you'll get what they got, because rarely have we seen a person fail. But if you do something different than that, then, you know, we have no way of knowing what your outcomes may be. So tonight, we're going to be in step 2. Last week, we took a journey of powerlessness and unmanageability. Tonight, we're going to have our encounter with power. They're going to tell us where and how to find this power. They're going to tell us how to recognize this power, a sensory, tangible experience that one can improve consciousness of, awareness of being aware of a power in and on my life operating through me. Does this make sense? So we're in chapter 4, chapter called We Agnostics. And they say in the preceding chapters, you've learned something of alcoholism. So you might want to ask yourself, since we're trying to turn every statement into a question, have I learned something of alcoholism?
A whole lot.
Sean says he's learned a whole lot. How many of you learned a lot about your alcoholism by being an active alcoholism? Some of you did that, or other addictive disorders. Okay. So they talked to us about the experience of powerlessness and unmanageability, and they wanted to emphasize to us that powerlessness and unmanageability are not concepts, they're experiences. The inability to carry out any meaningful thing to substantiate my existence. Yeah. So then it says, we hope we've made clear the distinction between the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic. So what was it that how did they differentiate that?
The one symptom was that we go into physical cravings once we put alcohol into our body.
Okay, so I don't know if you can all in internet land hear Sean, but he said we have one symptom. We may have many similarities, but we have one absolute symptom in common if we are this person, that when I ingest any amount of that into my body, I'm no longer in control over the amount I take from there on. It's maybe a manifestation of an allergy, the doctor said. So then they go on to ask us some questions to see if we can sort of self-diagnose, even if we can't wrap our head around a medical model. It says, if when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely. So you might want to ask yourself, have you ever tried to stop and stay stopped?
Yeah.
Did you find you couldn't?
Yeah.
Over and over again.
So stop and stay stopped would indicate there wouldn't be an over and over again. but that's, again, it's that illusion of control. Does it make sense? Or if when drinking, you have little control over the amount you take. Have any of you discovered that? You could control it when you didn't do it, and you could go for long periods of time, but when you did do it, you're off the rails. Anybody? Yes? Okay, so then it says, well, you're probably alcoholic. Now, these are the experts on alcoholism at the time. Why did they leave it an open question?
Self-diagnosis.
Yeah, do you agree with Sean? Everyone that's here? Because what difference does it make my opinion of your condition? A lot of people had an opinion about my condition. They shared it with me. I just made me avoid them. So the reality is that we're going to have to get honest with ourselves. If one of those two conditions are present, why did that happen? And if you're treating something other than addictive disorder here, if you're treating a behavioral disorder, same thing applies. Did you engage in behavior that inevitably ended you in bad situations over and over again without any real thought of the consequence because of whatever the rush was you got by doing something? And if that's true, you might want to take a look at that. You may have a condition beyond your mental control. We see that a lot with people that have a criminal past. Well, I don't have a drug problem. No, because you're high on adrenaline. And you don't need these other chemicals. You just go out and the excitement's enough to keep you coming back. So if that be the case, you may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. So they're not telling you what's true. They're just saying it may be true because that was what's true with them. So you may want to consider whatever my prejudice is that's blocking me from this spiritual experience I may need. It is their opinion, their observation, that may be the only way if I'm anything like them. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So then it says, to one who feels he's an atheist or agnostic, such an experience seems impossible. So you might want to ask yourself, if you believe yourself the atheist is the one who says there is no God, the agnostic says if there is, it can't be proven. Or it can't help me or won't help me or whatever. Just doubting the power in general, right? So you ask yourself, if you think yourself that, do you think this experience impossible? Some people say yes, and the reality is why? What would be the harm in opening your mind to the fact that it may be possible even if you don't believe? And if you're not, if you're there, then they got another sentence for you. But to continue as he is means disaster, especially if he's an alcoholic of the hopeless variety. So how many of you kind of did deduce at some point to continue as you were meant disaster, regardless of theological beliefs or spiritual experiences or any of that? Doing what I'm doing is definitely not reaping what I was trying to sow. Okay, so then it says, here's the alternative we face. To be doomed to an alcoholic death or to live on a spiritual basis are not always easy alternatives to face. So Sean finds it humorous even after all these years, mainly probably because he had to face that alternative one time. And the reality is all of us face that alternative. Notice it's not a choice. Right. A choice is not an alternative. A choice is I can take this or I can take that or I can take neither. But an alternative is this one's got me. I'm going to crash because of this one. And the only thing that might work is that other one I'm afraid of. But what I do know is this one is taking me to the end and not quick enough. So that's an alternative. What do you want to do with that alternative? Do you want to open your mind just a little? Is it possible there's something you don't know? Yes? That's all I'm asking to anyone who doubts this power in their life. Then that's the question. That is the alternative we're faced with if we're this hopeless variety human. Then it says, but it isn't so difficult. Now, I just painted a very difficult picture. And the authors, that's, I think, why Sean laughs at that point every time. The authors are saying, why are you making it hard on you? We once thought and felt as you do. This is what happened to us. That's why I started taking some of the drugs I started taking, because someone says, I once thought and felt like you, but I did this, and now I don't give a shit about nothing. And that's how I ended up in that pickle. anyway, but it isn't so difficult. About half our original fellowship were of exactly that type. What type?
The hopeless.
Hopeless variety, atheist or agnostic. About half of them.
Yeah.
Then it said at first some of us tried to avoid the issue, hoping against hope we were not true alcoholics. Well, look, I can't be restored by this power because I don't believe. But maybe I'm really not hopeless. Any of you feel the vacillation? Any of you remember it in your own walk? I'm not sure what this power God will do, but I may not be as hopeless as I thought I was. Maybe we could do this different. I heard a guy at the meeting say he didn't pick up no matter what. Maybe I could do that. That's what I did the last 6 times, but maybe this time I mean it. But after a while, we had to face the fact that we must find a spiritual basis of life or else. So some of them struggle. People, when you see the guy in the room that's been back 6 times and he keeps wanting to do it his own way, don't give up. Model different behavior. He's going through this. Does this make sense? And all of us did it to some degree, or we wouldn't be chuckling. And some of us are feeling very somber right now because we remember being in that place before we were lifted out. So then it says, perhaps it's going to be that way with you. Again, no earnestness. You decide. Your addiction's a calling or a curse. You decide. It was either for purpose or a useless experience. You decide. So then it says, but cheer up. Something like half of us thought we were atheists or agnostics. So of the first 100, roughly half were this type. What would the other half have been? Believers in something who just didn't feel they were worthy of redemption or didn't know what redemption looked like or whatever. And then it says, our experience shows you need not be disconcerted. So they focus this back on the experience. So what we want to do as we go through their testimony is not try and, well, I never did that. I never did that. What I need to focus you on is the experience within you, because they're going to tell us about that.
Right.
Okay? So if a mere code of morals or a better philosophy of life were sufficient to overcome alcoholism, many of us would have recovered long ago. So how many of you tried changing your codes and philosophies? You used to hear it a lot in the fellowships, change your playmates and playthings. I did that until I didn't do that. I even changed my residence a few times. But we found that such codes and philosophies did not save us no matter how much we tried. So they're not telling you anything about you. They're telling you about them. Because later on, they're going to say, if you want what we have and you're willing to go to any length to get it, then you're ready. And now they're laying the groundwork because I've already admitted powerlessness. I'm not going to be able to take certain steps until I've encountered power to take me through those steps, which is why 2 comes before 3, interestingly enough. So we could wish to be moral. We could wish to be philosophically comforted. In fact, we could will these things with all our might, but the needed power wasn't there. How many of you have been in a really dark place? Didn't have to do with addiction necessarily. You could be stone cold sober and be in a really dark place. Didn't want to be in a dark place. How many of you needed power to be philosophically comforted? This very day, I need power to be philosophically comforted. It said, our human resources as marshaled by the will were not sufficient. They failed utterly. How many of you had that experience? At first, you tried to do it and it wasn't enough. And then you really doubled down and then you really crashed. Failed utterly. So it says lack of power, that was our dilemma. We had to find a power by which we could live, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves. Power greater than ourselves is in italics for a reason, because if it's all about self, then why didn't I do it before the whole train crashed? You know what I mean? By the time I'm ready for recovery, maybe not the fellowship, but the program, then I have to know that self is insufficient based on my own experience. That makes sense? In fact, they're going to tell me self's the problem. But so it said a power by which we could live. How many of you have at least concluded, no matter what your religious leanings, spiritual leanings, is that we don't make decisions to live and die on our own, even though we sometimes think we do. And we learned that because, number one, we weren't consulted in our entry into the world, not a single one of us. We just showed up. And then many of us engaged in behavior that killed a lot of people around us, and yet here we are. And we start asking the question, why me? And the real question to ask is, why not you? You've been called for a purpose. You want the calling or the curse? Okay. So then it says, but where and how are we to find this power? So that would be the question, wouldn't it? If I've acknowledged I need power to live, because I got a power in me wants me dead. It's been on full display. And there's a power in me that wants me to live as well, but the one wants me dead seems to be winning. So what I need to do is I got to find out where and how to access more improved consciousness, awareness of being aware of that power, right? So where and how are we going to find this power? Well, that's exactly what this book is about. So let's go to page 55, because we don't ever want to leave people hanging, and let's see where and how, then we'll come back. Fair enough? So remember, the answer is where and how do I find the power to live? Yes? This isn't about picking up or not picking up. That's a byproduct of living an abundant life. Sensible? Okay. So I'm going to be on page 55, and it says in the second paragraph, actually, we were fooling ourselves. See why self's not enough? Because to a person, we fool ourselves. We're always looking outside of ourselves for things like happiness, joy, peace, and we find it's fleeting if it's there at all, yes? Like the horse chasing a carrot on a stick. Never quite get it. So it says, actually, we were fooling ourselves, for deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. Power. Good deal. All right, Rick. So when we read that, a lot of people miss what they're saying. They say, well, I don't believe, therefore that's not true for me. No one said anything to do about your beliefs in that sentence. What they discovered is that every man, woman, and child had within them a fundamental idea placed within them. That's what it says. And it doesn't say my idea of God, it said God's idea.
Power.
Yes, power. And purpose. Yes. Right? So it may be obscured by calamity, by pomp, by worship of other things, but in some form or other it's there. So why am I going to do an inventory? After I make a decision in another step, I'm going to do an inventory to examine those calamities, pomps, and worships that have obscured my consciousness. So it all starts to make logical sense. Why would I do this? Then make a decision, and then with this power to enact the decision, start looking at the calamities, pomps, and worships that have obscured my consciousness. Sensible? All right, so faith in a power greater than ourselves and miraculous demonstrations of that power in human lives are facts as old as man himself. We finally saw that faith in some kind of God was a part of our makeup, just as much as the feeling we have for a friend. So, how many of you have had other worships? Everyone with an addiction's had a worship. How many of you have attached your identity to a position, a job, a worldly thing? Okay, so we're going to have worships no matter what, right? I'm the same person the day after I lose my job as I was the day before it, but I don't believe that because my identity went away, right? But did my identity go away? No, that's the lie. That's why I want to access this power, because no one can take my identity, right? And I can't get a promotion from what I already know myself to be. I'm a child of the Most High. That's it. That's it. Doesn't matter. You can give me any title you want. I will not surrender my childhood to the Most High for any of it. So, and any of you that think I will, follow along. See what happens next. Faffo. Fuck around and find out. So, sometimes we had to search fearlessly, but he was there. Okay, so they've told us where and how. Where are we going looking? Deep down inside. And how are we going to find it? Sometimes we're going to have to search fearlessly. They've told us where and how we're going to find power to live. How many of you were always looking outside of yourself all your life till someone redirected you? That's why this is life-changing. So he was as much a fact as we were. the power that animates me is at least as real as me, because I'm 90% thought. I'm thinking all kinds of things are happening that aren't happening. The one constant is the watcher within me. I learned that through this process. We found the great reality deep down within us. Now they're telling you their testimony. Half of them atheists or agnostics. They found that great reality within them. There is a source of life within them. Every man, woman, and child, they said. And said in the last analysis, it's only there that he may be found. It was so with us. How many of you, as you started in the manner of living, started looking outside of yourself again for your identity? It's painful, isn't it? When all of a sudden the identity gets snatched again and again and again. And the only analysis, last analysis, it's only within that it can be found. Does it make sense? Okay, so let's go back to 45 since we jumped away. And it says that's exactly what this book is about. Its main object, the book's main object, is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. Which problem? Every problem you'll ever have for the rest of your life, if you'll remember where and how. No matter what problem you've got, there's a solution to it, right? But it's found within. All right, and then it says, that means we've written a book which we believe to be spiritual as well as moral, and it means, of course, that we're going to talk about God. Power. And the reason that people shout out power when we say God is so that we don't prejudice anyone that's still sitting in that atheist agnostic, I can't believe in something I can't feel. We're going to prove to you you can feel it. We're going to tell you how you feel it, and we're going to sit with you while you feel it and point out to you that you are feeling it. That's the job of a sponsor, to help you wake up. And then it says, that means we've written a book that's be spiritual as well as moral, and it means we're going to talk about God. Here, difficulty arises with agnostics. Many times we talk to the new man and watch his hope rise as we discuss his alcoholic problems and explain our fellowship. But his face falls when we speak of spiritual matters, especially when we mention God. For we've reopened a subject which our man thought he had neatly evaded or entirely ignored. You might want to ask yourself, did you think when you came, you found everyone not picking up no matter what, and you went to parties and you did stuff and you hung out and you had accountability and you did all that stuff, and you thought, maybe I was making too much of it. Maybe I don't need any of that stuff. And then one day the wheels came off again. Any of you had that happen to you? Seen it happen to others? So we know how he feels. We have shared his honest doubt and prejudice. So guys, you're always got to be honest with the power within you and find one other human on your journey that you can be entirely honest with too. Sounds like a suggestion you probably heard for every journey you've ever been through, a recovery room or a church fellowship or any, right? So you guys that are brand new, that's your only obligation to yourself. Share your honest doubt and prejudice. We're obligated to explain to you why we believe. If you ask and you're just got honest doubt and prejudice, we're going to clear it up for you. Does it make sense? All right. So some of us have been violently anti-religious. So if you're out there and you're violently anti-religious, most of us that have been snatched up this way are too, because we don't believe in dogma. We've experienced the power of grace, and so we don't believe in any of that dogma anyway. So I just want you to know, whatever it is you got going on, it's probably rattling within you, and it may just be that power to live wanting out. To others, the word God brought up a particular idea of him with which someone had tried to impress them during childhood. So if you had a bad religious experience growing up, we're sorry. If you had a bad recovery experience coming in and bouncing out, we're sorry. That was not any of us, our intent. And all I would suggest to you, once you get yourself straightened out and you go out and help others, make sure you give them what you'd rather have, not what you got. Right? Because we can change the world that way. All right. So perhaps we rejected this particular conception because it seemed inadequate. With that rejection, we imagined we'd abandoned the God idea entirely. We were bothered with the thought that faith and dependence upon a power beyond ourselves was somewhat weak, even cowardly. Any of you ever been bothered with a thought? It's a pretty powerful word when you think about it.
Lots.
Yeah, because we can stop everything we're doing in a positive direction because we're bothered with a thought. So we looked upon this world of warring individuals, warring theological systems, and inexplicable calamity with deep skepticism. So have you gotten so frustrated that you started looking outside of you again for explanations for why the insides of you are so tore up? Right? Ever just been so upset on the inside that everything you found was a target for why?
Yeah.
So we looked askance at many individuals who claim to be godly. Godlyly. How could a supreme being have anything to do with it all? Anybody? And who could comprehend a supreme being anyhow?
Only the supreme being.
Yeah. I mean, if we're trying to comprehend a supreme being, then we're not conceptualizing a supreme being. That's all. And we probably shouldn't be trying to do either, right? There's another little book that says, trust the Lord your God and lean not to your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him and he will light your path. It's old wisdom. You might want to consider where it came from. Yet in other moments, we found ourselves thinking when enchanted by a starlit night, who then made all this? So now they're talking to us about being inspired in life, seeing something so inspirational that stops us in our track, almost feels like an out-of-body experience. Many women in childbirth have that experience. Many people have these different experiences they're talking about. So it says there's a feeling of awe and wonder, but it was fleeting and soon lost. So yes, we of agnostic temperament have had these thoughts and experiences. So if you haven't done that, think about, have you ever been in a dangerous situation? If you were in a really dangerous situation, a car wreck, a fight, gunplay, and then all of a sudden in the middle of it, it seemed that time slowed down. Has that ever happened for any of you? When that happened, you experienced your consciousness. It's one of the names we give this power. Make sense? How about the athletes? Anyone ever make the perfect play, the perfect catch, the perfect shot? Like it looked impossible, but to you, you could see it all the way out. You could play it all the way out. You saw yourself making that particular thing. When that happened, you experienced your intuitive self. There was no doubt that you were going to do what everyone didn't believe you could do. Does it make sense? Okay, so now have we all had those thoughts and experiences? Because that's what we want to focus on. If I had that experience, that awe and wonder, that out of body, that experience of consciousness, time slowing down around me when I needed protection. Okay, let us make haste to reassure you. We found that as soon as we were able to lay aside prejudice, okay, so here's where you're going to get challenged. The minute we say, look, you've already had the encounter, now you're going to have to quit trying to explain it away in the natural when it was a supernatural encounter. Because that's what we do. Oh, well, this is why that happened. No, because it didn't happen every time. It happened in that moment. You can't make it happen on your own. Yes? It's just happened to me. All right, so then it says, we found that as soon as we were able to lay aside prejudice and express even a willingness to believe in a power greater than ourselves, we commenced to get results, even though it was impossible for any of us to fully define or comprehend that power, which is God. So regardless about how you feel about the word God, they're focusing us on the experience of power. Does that make sense? And they've told us how we've already experienced the power, then we're going to talk about it some more. So much to our relief, we discovered we did not need to consider another's conception of God. Why do I not need to consider another's conception? Yeah, because this being that we call God is not a conception. It's just that simple. The only way you're going to know that power is to experience that power, acknowledge that power, and improve consciousness through prayer and meditation. It's the only way it's going to happen. And then it says, our own conception, however inadequate, was sufficient to make the approach and effect the contact with him. So I have people ask me, why do I have to contact him? Well, you would have to believe that he existed in order to do that. And you probably wouldn't do it because you're human unless you knew he was a rewarder of faith. So the reason you've got to reach out to him is he's been reaching out to you, right? Knock and the door will be open to you. Seek and you will find, right? Why? Because that's my obligation. All right. So then it says, as soon as we admitted the possible existence of a creative intelligence, a spirit of the universe underlying the totality of things, we began to be possessed of a new sense of power and direction, provided we took other simple steps. So they're pointing us to a sense of power and direction, like it's coming to me and coming to me rapidly. Does it make sense? A sense, right? And they said that would happen when? As soon as I took a few simple steps. What do you imagine those are?
Probably the steps on the decision in the process.
Yeah, but probably this is the power to enact a decision, right? And the first step of action is going to be an inventory, and the second step of action is going to be sharing it with another man, and the power that we've uncovered. And they said that power and direction is going to come to me increasingly as soon as I took a few of those steps. That makes sense. That's why you want to do it, because there's a promise based on these guys who are a lot like us that said that's what happened to them, even though they had the same prejudice they just detailed. And it says, we found that God does not make too hard terms with those who seek him. To us, the realm of the spirit is broad, roomy, all-inclusive, never exclusive or forbidding to those who earnestly seek. It's open, we believe, to all men. So guys, don't get it twisted. You're still going to have to earnestly seek, and you're going to have to earnestly seek where they told you, inside. But you can claim to believe whatever you want to believe. Your beliefs will be shaped by your experience. Trust that. So when, therefore, we speak to you of God, we mean your own conception of God. So we start where you are, whatever that conception is. But we're focusing you on the experience of the acknowledgement. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So this applies too to other spiritual expressions, which you find in this book. Do not let any prejudice you may have against spiritual terms deter you from honestly asking yourself what they mean to you. So it's not important what you think those terms mean. Let's find out what they mean to you and why is that stopping you from making progress. And have you ever had ideas that stopped you from making progress in the past? And would you like to learn to identify them so that you don't keep staying stuck? Those are simple questions, right?
Yeah.
So then it says at the start, this was all we needed to commence spiritual growth, to affect our first conscious relation with God as we understood him. So don't get it twisted. They said a conscious relation. So that's tangible, that's sensory. I'm aware that I'm aware, and that is my entirety of my understanding. Is that what I was looking for or claimed to be looking for isn't found out there. It's only found within, and his name is God. Does that make sense? And you can call him anything you want, but you better learn to call on him if you're anything like me. All right, so afterward, we found ourselves accepting many things which then seemed entirely out of reach. How many of you have grown spiritually to the point where the way you think now isn't even closely resembling where you once were? So it says that was growth, but if we wish to grow, we had to begin somewhere. So everyone begins. And the good news is this power meets us where we are. All we have to do is acknowledge that's occurred and start taking these simple steps, and that is our seeking. Does that make sense? It's really, the AA makes this really simple. So we used our own conception, however limited it was. We needed to ask ourselves but one short question. Do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe that there is a power greater than myself? Now this little phrase, I don't think people internalize, but that's a second step question every man, woman, and child needs to ask themselves. And I want to tell you, if you're not willing, you're wasting valuable high time. Because they didn't say anything about God. If I don't believe there's any power greater than me, then why am I in here saying I'm a methamphetamine addict? Why am I saying I'm an alcoholic? Why am I saying I'm a cocaine addict, right? If you don't believe those chemicals that chased you in here are a power greater than yourself based on your experience, you're wasting your own time. So get honest about why you're in a recovery fellowship. Look yourself in the mirror, and can I at least acknowledge that at least these chemicals and these situations appear to have overpowered me? because that's the gravity of the question. And don't get theological here, because they're not. They said we come to believe in an illness before we come to believe we need a healing. They told us that, and there's a solution. All right, so as soon as a man can say that he does believe or is willing to believe, we emphatically assure him that he's on his way. How could they be so emphatic?
Because they experienced.
There's the first 100. They had that experience for several thousand. They knew it. They knew it not only from sight, but from full sensory watching it happen, unfold over and over again. It has been repeatedly proven among us that upon this simple cornerstone, a wonderfully effective spiritual structure can be built. What's the cornerstone?
Faith.
Yep, my willingness to believe.
The experience of the power.
Mm-hmm. There you go. So that was great news to us. Some of you students of that other book, you know, how they talk about great news. To the person who's dying every day, a little bit at a time, or maybe walking around dead, to know that there is life and it's in me and I can live more abundantly, that's good news. All right, so for we assumed we could not make use of spiritual principles unless we accepted many things on faith which seemed difficult to believe. How many of you thought you had to swallow the whole cow before you could taste a hamburger? Doesn't make any sense when you say it that way, but some of us do that to ourselves, right? So when people presented us with spiritual approaches, how frequently did we all say, I wish I had what that man has. I'm sure it would work if I could only believe as he believes. But I cannot accept as surely true the many articles of faith which are so plain to him. I don't know what take you get on those words, but they were so revealing in that we all, no matter how long we're sober, no matter how long we're in the walk, we come to places where it is so dark, I just don't believe I'm worthy, or I'm not this time. I just doubt the redemptive power that I've experienced over and over. Anyone know what I'm talking about? So that's what they're talking about. And they said so it was comforting to learn that we could commence at a simpler level. So if you can feel what I'm saying to you, wherever this finds you, then you already have it. And if you'll engage in this process, we'll wake you up to it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Some of you are feeling it somewhere, because I'm feeling it's resonating in here. So besides the seeming inability to accept much on faith, we often found ourselves handicapped by obstinacy, sensitiveness, and unreasoning prejudice. Any of you ever been handicapped by those things? And unreasoning prejudice is just, I don't even know what the word means, but I know I don't like when people use it.
Especially toward you.
Yeah, or in general. And I know I don't like the way those people look. I know what those kind of people are like. A lot of us have had that kind of societal judgment. We've experienced homelessness. We've experienced incarceration. So we continue to experience it in our life. Maybe it's skin color, maybe, and ethnicity. People don't understand that, being singled out for something beyond my control is a palpable imprisonment, that if I believe that lie, I stay down. But it is a lie. Many of us have been so touchy, and even a casual reference to spiritual things made us bristle with antagonism. You might ask yourself, if that's you, where's the bristling coming from? And remember where the power is found. Because a power that wants out will bristle. And a power that doesn't want to give you up will also bristle. Anyway, though some of us resisted, we found no great difficulty in casting aside such feelings. They walked through it, guys. I don't need 100% faith all the time. I need 50 plus 1/10 of 100 or 1%. I just need enough to walk. And if I can walk, my faith will grow. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Faced with alcoholic destruction, we soon became as open-minded on spiritual matters as we had tried to be on other questions. In this respect, alcohol was a great persuader. It finally beat us into a state of reasonableness. So if you're not done, you're not done. But if you are done, you might want to consider their testimony. That's all we're saying. We're not going to try and convince you. That's alcohol's job. That's prison's job. That's methamphetamine's job. That's life's job to convince you that you are not the source of life, although the source of life has chosen you and called you. So sometimes this was the tedious process. Any of you be through some tedious stuff? We hope no one else will be prejudiced for as long as some of us were. And most of us can, as you can hear the giggles, there's people that know. And if you know, you know. So the reader may still ask why he should believe in a power greater than himself. So we're not mad at you. That's honest doubt and prejudice. Okay, I'm on you, I'm with you, but why? Okay, now we'll explain it to you. All right, so we think they're good reasons. Let's have a look at some of them. The practical individual of today is a stickler for facts and results. Nevertheless, the 20th century readily accepts theories of all kinds, provided they are firmly grounded in fact. We have numerous theories, for example, about electricity. Everybody believes them without a murmur of doubt. Why this ready acceptance? You got to dig deep. Sean points out in his eloquent way that no one expected you to believe in electricity without a demonstration of electricity's power. You don't know everything about electricity and the theory of electrical energy, but you do know that if you touch certain things with certain implements, you're going to get blown off your chair. Probably know it from experience, right? They're telling you, they're equating the power of electricity that we do not see, and they're telling us you believed on it based on faith because someone told you that's what it was once you experienced its effects. And so they know half of us are atheists or agnostics or believing or irredeemable, whatever. So they're saying, we're not expecting you to believe in what we're telling you without first experiencing the effects. So it's not a group of drunks, and it's not a doorknob, and it's not a light bulb, because none of those things are found within you, and none of them are what we're talking about. What we're talking about is a sensory power found within you, no different than electrical energy, that you're going to feel within you. And that consciousness can be improved in order to deliver me from where I've been. So simply because it's impossible to explain what we see, feel, direct, and use without a reasonable assumption is a starting point. Yes? So we all agree that's what we're talking about? All right, so everybody nowadays believes in scores of assumptions for which there's good evidence, but no perfect visual proof. And does not science demonstrate that visual proof is the weakest proof? So ask yourself that question. Does not science as it's advanced even more so, right? You see a whole picture on an internet and the whole picture can be completely false. Yeah? See it all the time. So it's being constantly revealed as mankind studies the material world that outward appearances are not inward reality at all. Any of you students of that other book, right? Walk by faith, not by sight. Why? Because outward appearances are not inward reality. I say I know it, but what do I walk like? A lot of times I walk like I don't know it. Okay, so the prosaic steel girder is a mass of electrons whirling around each other at incredible speed. These tiny bodies are governed by precise laws, and these laws hold true throughout the material world. Science tells us so. We have no reason to doubt it. When, however, the perfectly logical assumption is suggested that underneath the material world and life as we see it, there is an all-powerful guiding creative intelligence, right there our perverse streak comes to the surface, and we laboriously set out to convince ourselves it isn't so. We read wordy books and indulge in windy arguments, thinking we believe this universe needs no God to explain it. Now, guys, those of you that are still struggling with that word, substitute power. Does this universe of ours require a power to explain it? Everyone agrees that's a fact. So we're arguing and dying over words. The authors are trying to get us to question our prejudice, not other people's testimony, right? So were our contentions true, it would follow that life originated out of nothing, means nothing, and proceeds nowhere. And many of us lived as if that were true. Yes? Instead of regarding ourselves as intelligent agents, this is where they're telling us what the alternative is. I can be this pinball running around this mighty machine called life, or I can be an intelligent agent, a spearhead, a driving force of God's ever-advancing creation. So I can be a force for good, or I can continue to run around aimlessly. That's my alternative. They're describing it again. Yes? We agnostics and atheists chose to believe that our human intelligence was the last word, the alpha and the omega, the beginning and end of all. Rather vain of us, wasn't it? So they asked the question, but a lot of us read right past it. Let's examine the question. Was it vain or not? How many of you did have to consult somebody prior to coming to in this world? There wasn't a committee formed to talk to you about when you wanted to arrive? You just sort of came into it? So that kind of takes alpha off the table. Okay, so let's look at the end. How many of you behaved in ways that lots of people did not survive? How many of you even made intentional shots at making sure you didn't survive, whether you admitted to it or not? And the fact that you're still here tells us what? Apparently not too good at the end either. So then, of course, that would be rather vain, given my history, that I'm all that, because I'm So we who have traveled this dubious path beg you to lay aside prejudice. So do the mental image for yourself. You guys that are new, you're going through this again. Lay aside prejudice. Whatever I think it means, maybe I don't know what it means. Let's truly have a new experience. I don't know how many people start quoting this book to me. And I said, I'm really impressed with your ability to memorize what it means. What I'm unimpressed with is your inability to describe to me the experience of the power you found as a result of it. Right. Perhaps you ought to do what it says instead of quote it. It's not enough. I don't care if you eat this book and poop alphabet soup. It's not going to help. You got to do what it says. Okay, so even again, lay aside prejudice, even against organized religion. We've learned that whatever the human frailties of various faiths may be, those faiths have given purpose and direction to millions. Notice how they didn't say those religions. Faith, just like your recovery fellowship. If you hate the church, the recovery fellowship is an act of faith. Those faiths have given their purpose and direction to millions who won't think or talk like you. But that doesn't mean faith's not activated. Does that make sense? Yeah. We got a product that teaches biblical teaching and its relation to AA teaching, and we call it, we're both seeking the same power. Because I've been in both. I've been in the church community and I've been in the recovery community, and we're both talking about the same redemption, the same power, the same life of service, and we can't talk to each other because we're prejudiced about the way we say it. And a lot of what PON is trying to do is change that for the whole world. It's a humble undertaking from our standpoint, because we know we have nothing to do with it, but the power we serve is audacious. And he said for me to tell you, our intent is to change the world. So people of faith have a logical idea what life is all about. Actually, we used to have no reasonable conception whatever. We used to amuse ourselves by cynically dissecting spiritual beliefs and practices when we might have observed that many spiritually minded persons of all races, colors, and creeds were demonstrating a degree of stability, happiness, and usefulness that we should have sought ourselves. So those of you that have been in and out of churches and there was always someone mean to you and so you went to another one, did you eventually end up going somewhere and you found somebody and they were still in practice and they were still kind and they didn't seem... How about you guys that went in and out of recovery? Was there still somebody there that was kind, realized you had the DT so bad you couldn't hold a whole cup of coffee, so they gave you half a cup of coffee? Somebody there that knew. See, those are the people we're looking for. I'm always looking for the exception instead of the person that's actually showing me it works. And works is rare, guys. Shouldn't be this rare, but it is. But you can find them. They're the ones with compassion and empathy, and they're in every fellowship. All right, so instead we looked at the human defects of these people and sometimes used their shortcomings as a basis of wholesale condemnation. We talked of intolerance while we were intolerant ourselves. You ever notice that? The minute I start to judge how you're thinking or acting, I'm the one doing the judging. And now I don't know whether I'm judging you or I'm... right? Because I'm looking right through my thinker. All right, so we missed the reality and the beauty of the forest because we were diverted by the ugliness of some of its trees. We never gave the spiritual side of life a fair hearing. So what I've got to do, at least, because I can't move into a conscious relation without examining it consciously with my logical senses. So it's going to have to make sense. That's why we're going to all this trouble to break it down for you so you can walk into it consciously, right? And everyone deserves that dignity. But then if I'm stopped at some point, did I give this a fair hearing or did I expect something to be different than what it was? Because sometimes I think the result's going to be different. Like if I thought all my problems were going to go away because I stopped drinking, I was wrong. I had a lot of problems. They didn't go away because I stopped drinking. But one thing that did happen is I wasn't consumed by them once I wasn't consumed by alcohol. So in our personal stories, you'll find a wide variation in the way each teller approaches and conceives of the power which is greater than himself. Whether we agree with a particular approach or conception seems to make little difference. Experience has taught us that these are matters about which, for our purpose, we need not be worried. They're questions for each individual to settle for himself. No one here is going to try and convince you that what I believe is the only way to believe. I'm just going to show you how I came to believe what I came to believe and encourage you to follow some similar paths in order to overcome your own prejudice based on what you're willing to do, right? On one proposition, however, these men and women are strikingly agreed. Every one of them, and you got to listen, this is the first 100, they're writing the story of the first several thousand. This is a profound statement. Every one of them has gained access to and believes in. Look at the order they put that in. I have to gain access. I have to know that I've gained access. You had to have your encounter first before you came to believe. Does it make sense? Yeah. And then it says, believes in a power greater than himself. This power has in each case accomplished the miraculous, the humanly impossible. As a celebrated American statesman put it, let's look at the record. Here are thousands of men and women, worldly indeed. So the story of the book, AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, the story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism. So now they're telling the story of the first several thousand. If you're with me, this is them summarizing it. They flatly declare that since they have come to believe in a power greater than themselves, to take a certain attitude toward that power and to do certain simple things, there's been a revolutionary change in their way of living and thinking. In the face of collapse and despair, in the face of the total failure of their human resources, they found that a new power, peace, happiness, and sense of direction flowed into them. This happened soon after they wholeheartedly met a few simple requirements. So they never tell you something without telling you what the requirements are. So what were the requirements? That's how they started. And then obviously the manner of living continues and trust the power, clean house, work with others, right? And you'll continue to grow consciously. That's the promise. So they're not asking you to believe, just like you grab an electrical appliance and you get shocked, you believe in electricity at that moment. Why? Because it shocked you. You also believe in electricity every time you get up and change the thermostat. That's an act of faith.
It works.
Yeah. So what they're telling you here is you're going to have the same experience with this power if you'll start employing these tools they're laying out for us. Does that make sense? And you're going to experience it as power, peace, happiness, and a sense of direction. Back to the psalm I read. Trust God, lean not to your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will light your path. Yes? And that's what they're telling you happened. Okay. Yes?
Yes.
For those of you that always want me to, you're not doing it biblically enough. I'm trying to. But some people are prejudiced about that, and it's just as prejudiced as the ones that are. So I'm just trying to say it's very old wisdom. A lot of people rely on it. We're just trying to help you understand that these people are talking about real stuff, the great reality. All right. So I want to do one more thing before. Let's see what I got to do. I'm going to go to page 53, middle of the page. And the authors are going to talk to us about something that a lot of people argue about, and I just want people to internalize it. It says, when we became alcoholics. So I always was intrigued by those words. When do we become alcoholic? Did I drink my way there? Was I always one? Is it nature or nurture? Are we going to have a debate over this when I cross the line? But these guys aren't debating anything. This is a book of experience. They've already told us that. And they've told us who they are, right? We're the first 100. We're telling you the story of the first several thousand. And they're telling you when I became alcoholic in any meaningful way based on when they became alcoholic in any meaningful way. How many of you would like to hear what they had to say? Wow, I never thought of that. Joe, please tell us when they said I became alcoholic. Well, they didn't say you did. They said we did. But this may be the conclusion you reach. It says, crushed by a self-imposed crisis we could not postpone or evade, we had fearlessly faced the proposition that either God is everything or else he's nothing. God either is or he isn't. What is our choice to be? I do not become an alcoholic in any meaningful way according to them until I have admitted that God is everything. No matter how many fellowships you go to. Power is everything. Does that make sense? We use the word God so that we can agree because sensory experiences by their nature are elusive. Right? Everyone knows the feeling of hitting a line, hard to describe it. Everyone knows the taste of Coca-Cola, hard to describe it. Everyone knows what a rose smells like, hard to describe it. So we agree on the sensory experience of power, peace, happiness, sense of direction, and collectively we call that power God. Does that make sense? So that's all we're going to do tonight. Hope you had your encounter. See you next week.
Thanks, Joe.
Awkward, upward.
We